Hey everybody, meteorologist Riley Blackwell here. We're just going to talk through the tropics. We do have a little bit going on as the National Hurricane Center has upped the chance of this low pressure system off the eastern coast, now really over parts of Florida, upwards of a 40% chance of development over the next 2 to 7 days. It's a medium threat, but there's still no guarantee that this storm could form into a tropical depression or a tropical storm or even a hurricane by any means. But of course, we'll discuss all of that moving forward. Now, taking a little bit closer look at the overall structure of the system, it's very, very messy. The low is trying to spin over Orlando, Tampa area, and eventually into the northeastern Gulf. And we do have some thunderstorms popping up on the western side, but usually the western side isn't a good indicator of strengthening. You usually see that on the eastern side. We say the east is the beast for multiple reasons with a tropical system, but that low really trying to spin, not looking very organized, looking at infrared satellite, although there are still a couple of thunderstorms popping up over mainland Florida, but in general, right now it's looking very, very messy. Now, one thing we've been talking about really for the past several days are probabilities, ensemble probabilities. All of the different runs of the European kind of joining together to create almost an average. And from earlier this morning, the probabilities of a tropical depression forming has actually gone down a little bit, which is great news. Now, it's still holding at about a 60 to 70% chance of a tropical depression forming. That's winds at or below 39 miles per hour. And the tropical storm probabilities, they are still there. Once again, they are still very low. Only about I'd say 20% chance of a tropical storm forming or tropical winds forming, anything above 40 miles per hour over the next 7 days or so. Now, we do have some limiting factors when it comes to this particular system. One, are sea surface temperatures. Now, looking at it and looking at these numbers, they look pretty elevated, but in terms of summertime, July, ocean temperatures, these are not extremely high, especially on the western coast of Florida and the eastern coast of Florida, where we're only registering middle 80s, potentially even lower 80s in some spots. Now, closer to Louisiana, off the swamps, we do have 87, so it is a little bit warmer the closer you get to parts of Louisiana. But in general too, it is a little bit, I don't want to say cooler, but a little bit lower than what we should be expecting for any kind of significant kind of intensification. Another big thing we're seeing is shear. Shear is looking rather elevated over the next couple of days. And that's one thing that a tropical system does not need is elevated shear, because hurricanes or tropical systems like to try to stay as vertically stacked as possible. And the shear, whether it be directional shear or velocity, wind-based shear, it tries to tilt the overall center of circulation. And that's good for thunderstorm development, but in general for tropical development, it's really not in the cards. Now, earlier this morning, I talked about there are really two scenarios this thing could play out. But now with new model data coming in, we're actually seeing that the better scenario might actually pan out. So earlier I was talking about it could either go further to the north, hug the coastline, and in general would be a weaker overall system, or if it went further down to the south where it had less land interaction and a little more time, it could develop and be a touch stronger. But right now, the newest spaghetti models coming in are indicating that this will likely still hug the coast of Florida, the panhandle of Florida, parts of even the Alabama Gulf Coast, before making a slight southerly track, but really not far enough in the Gulf, I think, to make that much of a difference, but before making a pretty significant northward turn somewhere in Louisiana or Mississippi. Now, another thing too, you see most of these spaghetti models put Alabama on the eastern side of this system. And I know we talked about earlier, the east is the beast, but this system is not expected to intensify rapidly, get to a Category 5 major hurricane. No. When we have a stronger tropical system or even a low-end hurricane, the low pressure is strong enough to potentially spin up tornadoes as it moves inland on the outer bands of whatever system it might be. But in general, this storm is expected to stay very messy, even as it traverses the northern Gulf. It's going to have a lot of land interaction with parts of Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana. It's also going to have a lot of shear to contend with. So in general, just rapid intensification to something major or significant is not really expected. So now let's look at some modeling. This is the GFS, the American model. It's usually not extremely reliable in terms of tropical forecasting. It usually brings the hurricanes in way too strong, but with this particular system, it's actually keeping it very junky, disorganized. It might take a little bit further of a southerly track than what most of the more hurricane models are trying to hone in on. But still, even if it takes it further down to the south, it's not really developing anything around that overall low pressure system. That's good. That's fine. It's going to be another quick moving system too. So even if it has no shear, plentiful warmth, plentiful moisture coming from the Gulf, it might be moving too fast to intensify to anything significant before trying to make landfall. But this low pressure expected to impact somewhere along the Louisiana or Mississippi coast sometime on Thursday. Models have been fairly consistent with just sometime on Thursday impacting Louisiana, Mississippi coast. Now, we said earlier the east is the beast, but you can even see there's really no circulation around the eastern side. And that's good news. We can contend with tornadoes that are spawned from landfalling tropical systems, but in this scenario, it really doesn't look like we're expecting that at all. That low pressure then begins to move further inland, dissipates, but unfortunately it will likely bring us some rain chances beyond Wednesday, potentially even lasting into the weekend. So that, of course, that is going to be something to watch out for. Then this strong Bermuda high sets up once again. We're going to be left with random rain chances, plentiful moisture, and likely elevated heat indices. Now, this is the European model. In general, for really almost all types of forecasting, the European model is more reliable, it makes more sense, it's more consistent. But even the European model, depicting very similar scenario to the GFS, a very, very messy system. The low, once again, a little bit further down to the south than what the newer models are saying. Remember, very fast moving system, not much development or intensification is expected to take place before impacting somewhere Louisiana, Mississippi Gulf Coast sometime on Thursday. Now, aside from the winds, whether they strengthen a little bit or weaken a little bit, one, this is likely going to be a very prolific rainmaker for areas along the coast. Another thing too, I don't think the low pressure is strong enough to cause upwelling where cool water comes up to the surface, but rip currents are expected to be very, very dangerous over the next, I'd say from Wednesday all the way through the weekend. So if you're beach bound, just know it's not going to rain all day, everywhere. We might actually get some peaks of sunshine. The sunshine might not last long, but just know it's not going to rain all day, everywhere. But with a low pressure system in the Gulf expected to make landfall, rip currents could definitely be an issue. I would say Wednesday all the way through Friday, potentially lasting into the weekend. So do take precaution with that. Now, very similar with that low pressure system moves inland, causes us pretty elevated rain chances for the next several days. Now, in terms of potential rainfall totals, you can see up here locally, central North Alabama, 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 an inch. That's about it. But further down to the south, 3 to 5, potentially as high as 6 inches of rain could fall because right now it's just looking like a tropical low pressure that's going to be a very prolific rainmaker. Could cause maybe some higher wind gusts at times, but in general, no significant development is expected. We could get to right at tropical storm strength, and if that happens, it would be tropical storm Dexter, but even the intensity models are overall keeping this below tropical storm strength. So if you're beach bound, don't worry. You're likely going to contend with rain, but you also might see some peaks of sunshine, and of course, we'll keep you updated on air and online as the system progresses.